They had a word for death that translated roughly as the final equation. It was a cold phrase built from mathematics and certainty. All carbon-based life reached its end. The numbers always balanced to zero. Their medics were efficient and clinical. They could extend life by hours, sometimes days, but they did not speak to the dying. What would be the point? The equation was already solved. Commander of the Galactic Coalition's Third Fleet had seen 17 species fight and die under his command. He was old by standards, his scales faded to a dull gray, his eyes carrying the weight of too many battles. He understood the ways of death. The crystalline singers shattered into harmonic dust when their time came, their bodies breaking apart in patterns that other singers would later study for meaning. The methane breathers simply dissolved, their gaseous form spreading thin until nothing remained. The warriors died screaming for one last fight, their massive bodies thrashing until the very end. Each species met their end according to their nature, had never questioned the process. Death was death, the equation balanced, the universe moved on. Then the humans arrived. They came to the coalition as newcomers, a young species from a small blue world at the edge of explored space. They were soft creatures, fragile by most standards. They lacked this armor, this regeneration. The crystalline singers distributed consciousness. They died easily and often, but they were clever and they were brave in their strange way, and the coalition needed soldiers. When the coalition accepted humanity into its ranks, the integration officers assigned human support personnel where they seemed least likely to cause problems. The human chaplains were the strangest of all. 12 of them were scattered across the Third Fleet as a diplomatic courtesy. Observers, essentially. They were meant to tend only to their own kind, to perform their curious rituals for dying humans and stay out of the way. Chaplain Major was one of these 12. She was a weathered woman of 63 years, her hair more gray than black now, her face lined with the kind of wrinkles that came from too much sun and too many tears. She had buried her own son in a war on Earth 20 years ago, a roadside bomb in a desert country whose name most people had forgotten. After that, she had devoted her life to military chaplaincy. She had held the hands of dying soldiers on 3 continents. She had learned that death was not an equation. Death was a doorway, and no one should walk through it alone. The coalition did not understand this. They gave her a small quarters on the medical ship Eternal Calculation and told her to stay available for human casualties. She nodded politely and began to learn the ship's layout, memorizing the paths to every medical bay. The Battle of IV began on what the humans called a Tuesday. The hollow came out of dark space like a wave of hunger. They were nightmares, creatures that had long ago merged flesh with machine in ways that made them nearly impossible to kill. They did not conquer worlds. They consumed them. They ate everything organic, processed it through their terrible bodies, and moved on to the next feast. The Coalition's Third Fleet was supposed to stop them at IV. They failed. The battle lasted 11 hours. Watch from the command deck as ship after ship fell silent. The hollow boarded vessels with terrifying speed, their cutting limbs tearing through hull and flesh alike. By the time the retreat order came, the fleet had lost 40% of its strength. The medical bays overflowed. Moved through the chaos like a woman walking through a storm. The Eternal Calculation had taken damage, and its corridors were filled with smoke and screaming. She found the human wounded first, as was her duty. There were 17 of them, and she did what she could. She prayed with those who wanted prayers. She held hands with those who wanted company. She told lies to those who needed lies, promising them that their families would be fine, that their sacrifice meant something, that the warm light was coming. 3 of them died in her arms. She closed their eyes and moved on. It was in Medical Bay 7 that she found the lieutenant was young, barely past his species' age of maturity. His scales were still bright blue, the color of youth, or they had been. Now they were stained dark with blood, and his chest was a ruin of torn flesh and exposed bone. A hollow cutting limb had caught him during the boarding action. The wound had dissolved half his respiratory system with some kind of acid. The medics had examined him, calculated his remaining time, and marked his file with the symbol for terminal. Then they had moved on to patients who could be saved. This was their way. Resources were limited. The equation demanded efficiency. Was alone. Did not know why she stopped. She was supposed to tend to humans. They had their own ways, their own customs, their own understanding of death. She had no business interfering. But he was so young, and he was so alone, and his eyes, those strange vertical pupils, were wild with a fear that needed no translation. She knelt beside his bed. "Hello," she said. The translation device on her collar turned her words into sounds. "My name is." His eyes found her face. His breathing was wet and labored, each exhale bringing up dark blood. "Human," he managed. "You should not be here. I am calculated terminal." "I know," she said. She reached out and took his hand. His scales were cold, much colder than human skin, but she held on anyway. "I know, but I thought you might like some company." He stared at her. Did not do this. The dying were left alone to complete their equation in peace. What she was doing made no sense. "I do not understand," he said. "That's okay," said. "You don't have to understand, just rest, I'm here." She began to pray. Not loudly, not to convert him, not to impose her faith. She prayed quietly under her breath, because a dying creature should not be alone and she had no other gift to give. She prayed for peace. She prayed for comfort. She prayed that whatever came next would be gentle. Something changed. The medical monitors showed it first. Vitals had been fluctuating wildly, the jagged lines of terror death that the medics knew well. But as held his hand and prayed, the lines began to smooth. His breathing steadied. His blood pressure stopped its fatal climb. He was not healed. The wound was still mortal, but the panic was gone. Opened his eyes fully for the first time since his injury. He looked at with an expression that the medics later insisted was impossible. It was recognition, not of her face, not of her species, but of something deeper, recognition of another soul. "I feel," he said, and then stopped, struggling for words that his language did not contain. "Warm there is, a warm light coming closer." They did not believe in warm lights. They believed in equations and endings and the cold mathematics of entropy. There was no warm light in their philosophy. There was only the final zero. But saw it anyway. "Tell me about the light," said softly. "It is beautiful," he whispered. His grip on her hand tightened, then slowly relaxed. "I am not afraid. The warm light is coming. I can see. I can see." He never finished the sentence. His eyes stayed open, but the life behind them faded away like a candle in a gentle wind. The monitors flatlined. The equation balanced to zero. But his face was peaceful, and his hand was still holding hers. Sat with him for a long time after that. She did not know what had happened. She did not know why his fear had left him, or where he had seen a warm light that his people did not believe in. She only knew that he had not died alone, and that at the end he had not been afraid. She closed his eyes gently, the way she had closed so many eyes before. Then she stood up, straightened her uniform, and went to find others who were dying alone. The word spread through the fleet like ripples in still water. The medical bay of the Coalition cruiser Infinite Theorem was not designed for comfort. It was designed for efficiency. Rows of beds stretched in perfect lines, each one monitored by machines that tracked vital signs with cold precision. The walls were white and bare. The air smelled of antiseptic and something worse, something that every soldier learned to recognize, the smell of bodies breaking down. Doctor moved through this space with 17 sensory organs active, each one gathering data that her massive brain processed and cataloged. She was a species that prided itself on pure rationality. They had evolved on a world where survival depended on accurate observation. They did not believe in things they could not measure. The stories about the human chaplains annoyed her. It had been 3 weeks since the Battle of IV. 3 weeks since a human woman had allegedly done something impossible with a dying soldier. The rumors had grown in the telling, as rumors always did. Some versions claimed the human had healed the soldier with touch alone. Others said she had spoken words that glowed with visible light. The most absurd versions suggested that Lieutenant had been briefly resurrected before dying peacefully. None of it made scientific sense. Doctor had been assigned by Coalition Command to investigate. Her orders were simple: find out what the humans were actually doing and explain it in terms the rest of the fleet could understand. She suspected chemicals. Humans were known to produce a wide variety of pheromones and hormones. Perhaps they were secreting some unknown compound that affected other species. Or perhaps it was subsonic vibrations, or electromagnetic fields, or simple psychological manipulation of wounded minds. Whatever it was, she would find it. Her first subject was Chaplain David, a soft-spoken human male with dark skin and gentle eyes. He sat across from her in the observation room, his hands folded in his lap, waiting patiently for her questions. "Describe exactly what you do when you are with dying soldiers," Doctor said. Her translation device rendered the words in a flat, affectless tone. Smiled slightly. "I sit with them. I listen to them. I hold their hands if they want that. I pray if they want that. I tell them about what their own beliefs say happens after death if they have such beliefs. And if they do not have beliefs, I simply stay with them so they are not alone." "What chemicals do you administer?" "None." "What devices do you use?" "None." "What techniques do you employ to alter their psychological state?" Considered the question carefully. "I suppose you could call it presence. I try to be fully present with them. I try to see them as a person, not as a patient or a casualty or a statistic. I try to honor their life in its final moments." Doctor's sensory organs flickered with frustration. "That is not a technique. That is a description of an action." "Perhaps," said, "but it seems to help." They spent the next 2 weeks observing the human chaplains at work. She followed them through medical bays and triage centers and the quiet rooms where soldiers were sent to die. She watched Chaplain hold the hand of a crystalline singer whose resonance patterns were failing, whose body was slowly cracking apart from the inside. The singer should have shattered in agony. Instead, she broke into harmonic dust with something the other singers later described as perfect peace. She watched Chaplain sit with a methane breather colony mind, a distributed consciousness spread across thousands of tiny organisms. The colony was fragmenting, its individual parts losing connection with the whole. The process was usually terrifying for methane breathers, like feeling your own thoughts scatter into the wind, but spoke to the colony quietly, asking about its memories, its experiences, its understanding of what came next. The colony's final transmission, recorded by the monitoring equipment, translated roughly as, "We are not lost. We are becoming something new." Doctor's instruments detected nothing unusual. No chemicals, no signals, no electromagnetic anomalies, just humans sitting with dying aliens, speaking words that the translation matrix struggled to render. Words like grace. Words like soul. Words like sacred. These concepts had no equivalent in most coalition languages. The translation devices did their best, but something was always lost. When spoke of grace, the herd unearned favorable mathematical outcome. When spoke of the soul, the herd invisible battle spirit. The meanings were close, but not quite right. And yet somehow, the dying seemed to understand. The second miracle occurred during a counteroffensive against the Hollow. The warrior was named. He was 8 feet of armored muscle and berserker fury, a veteran of 30 battles who had killed more Hollow than any other soldier in his unit. His people believed that a warrior's final battle determined their eternal fate. Die well, with honor and courage, and you would feast forever in the halls of the ancestors. Die poorly, in fear or weakness, and your spirit would wander lost between the stars. was dying in a medical bay. This was the worst possible end. The Hollow had ambushed his unit during a boarding action. Their cutting limbs had taken 3 of his legs and most of his face. He could not see. He could barely breathe. And he knew, with the certainty of a warrior who had seen many deaths, that he would not survive. He was alone. His unit was still fighting somewhere on the ship. The medics had done what they could and moved on. He lay in the white room with its clean walls and its cold machines, and he felt his battle spirit fading into the endless dark. Then the human came. Chaplain had been searching for wounded humans when he found the massive warrior was barely conscious, his remaining arm twitching as if reaching for a weapon that was not there. His translator was damaged, producing only fragments of words. Final battle cannot, alone. Did not speak, but he understood desperation. He knelt beside the bed and placed his small human hand on the warrior's massive arm. "I am here," he said, knowing his words would barely translate. "You are not alone." The warrior's head turned toward his voice. "Human, your people, what happens to the brave?" It was a strange question from a dying alien, but understood what he was really asking. He was asking if his death would mean something. He was asking if the universe cared. Spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "My people believe that all brave souls go to a place of peace, a place where there is no more pain, no more fear, a place where warriors are honored. Your people see this place. Some say they do. When they are close to death, some say they see a great light, and in the light they see those who went before them waiting." Was silent for a long moment. Then with great effort he spoke again. "Tell me, what you see for me, what do you see?" Hesitated. He was not a liar by nature. His faith taught him to speak truth even when truth was difficult. But this warrior was dying, and he was terrified, and the truth was that could not see anything at all. But he could imagine. "I see the gates of your final field," said slowly. His voice was steady and calm. "They are opening. Your ancestors are watching from the other side. They see your wounds. They see what you have suffered. They are proud of you." The warrior made a sound that might have been a sob. "They are proud. Yes, they are calling your name. They are preparing a place for you at their table. You have fought well. You have earned your rest." This death rictus, a terrible, screaming thing that other would have fled from, began to relax. His remaining muscles stopped their frantic twitching. His breathing, ragged and wet, steadied into something almost peaceful. "I see them," whispered. "I see the gates. They are beautiful." His remaining eye found space and stayed there. The human chaplain held his gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to let this warrior die alone in the dark. "Go to them," said. "They are waiting for you." Smiled. It was a strange expression on his ruined face, but it was unmistakably a smile. Then he closed his eye and was gone. Doctor observed the entire event from the doorway. Her 17 sensory organs recorded every detail: the warrior's vital signs, the human's heart rate, the acoustic patterns of their voices, the chemical composition of the air. She found nothing that explained what she had witnessed. Her report to Coalition Command was brief and bewildered. She had expected to find some scientific explanation for the chaplain's effects. Instead, she had found only humans sitting with dying aliens, speaking words of comfort, treating death as something more than an equation. Her final sentence read, "The humans appear to be transmitting something our instruments cannot detect. I am forced to label it meaning." The High Command received a copy of her report 3 days later. Within a week, they had formally requested that human chaplains be assigned to all their forward combat units. The war against the Hollow had lasted 3 years when the Coalition finally found the Nexus. It was a structure at the edge of known space, a vast organic sphere that pulsed with dark energy. The Hollow did not build cities or stations. They consumed them. But the Nexus was different. The Nexus was where they came from. It was the heart of their hunger, the source of their endless expansion. Coalition Command assembled every available ship for the assault. This would be the largest battle in the history of the Alliance. If they destroyed the Nexus, the Hollow would lose their ability to coordinate, to reproduce, to spread. The war would be over. Chaplain Major was no longer a diplomatic courtesy. In the 3 years since IV, everything had changed. The human chaplains had spread throughout the fleet, their numbers growing as more were recruited from Earth and trained in coalition customs. They learned the death rituals of 17 species. They adapted their prayers to alien theologies. They sat with the dying of every world, holding hands and claws and tentacles, speaking words of comfort in languages they barely understood. They were listed in official coalition tactical documents now. The designation read, Psychological Force Multiplier. The data supported the label. Units with assigned chaplains showed lower rates of combat fatigue, higher morale scores, and significantly reduced panic responses during engagements. Soldiers who knew they would not die alone fought harder and surrendered less often. Commander had watched all of this with growing wonder. He was very old now, his scales pale gray, his body failing in the way that bodies eventually failed. He had expected to die in battle long ago. Instead, he had lived to see something he never thought possible, aliens learning mercy from humans. The Battle of the Nexus began at dawn, Coalition Standard Time. 2,000 ships converged on the organic sphere. The Hollow fought with desperate fury, throwing everything they had at the invaders. For 6 hours, the space around the Nexus was filled with fire and death. Ships exploded. Bodies drifted. The screaming of the wounded filled every communication channel. But the coalition did not break. In the end, ground forces breached the Nexus itself. They fought through corridors that looked like blood vessels, past chambers that pulsed like organs, until they reached the core. What they found there changed everything. The Hollow were not monsters. They were not mindless parasites driven by instinct alone. They were fragments, billions of fragments, of a species that had once been something else. Long ago, the intelligence reports would later reveal, the Hollow had been a people much like any other. They had built cities and written poetry and dreamed of the stars. They had also dreamed of immortality. They had tried to upload their consciousness into forms, to live forever as machines that could still feel. They had failed. Something had gone wrong in the transition. They had lost something essential, something the translation matrix struggled to render. Some called it soul, others called it meaning. The Hollow themselves called it nothing at all because they had forgotten that it ever existed. They consumed other beings because they were searching for what they had lost. Every mind they devoured, every consciousness they absorbed, they examined for the missing piece. But they never found it. The hunger was eternal because the emptiness was eternal. The coalition soldiers secured the core and prepared to destroy it. The war would finally be over. The galaxy would be safe. Then Chaplain Major walked into the chamber. She was 66 years old now, her hair completely white, her body tired from years of holding dying hands. She had buried more soldiers than she could count. She had seen more death than any person should see. And she had learned in all those years that death was not the enemy. The enemy was dying without meaning. The enemy was the terrible loneliness of minds that had forgotten how to connect. The hollow fragments in the core were not hostile, they were curious. They had never encountered a mind that was not afraid of them. They had never met a consciousness that reached toward them instead of pulling away. They gathered around like moths around a flame, their bodies clicking and whirring, their 1,000 eyes watching her with something that might have been hope. She sat down on the organic floor. She held out her hands. "I know what you are," she said. The translation device struggled with the concepts, but something got through. "I know what you lost, and I am so sorry." The hollow did not speak in words. They communicated in pulses of data, in chemical signals, in electromagnetic bursts. but the meaning was clear enough. We are empty, we ate to fill the emptiness. It did not work. No, said, it would not. You cannot find what you lost by taking it from others. You can only find it by giving. We do not understand. I know. She closed her eyes and remembered. She remembered her son, dead in a desert on a world far away. She remembered the first time she held a dying soldier's hand. She remembered every life she had witnessed ending, every soul she had tried to comfort, every moment of connection in the face of absolute darkness. But I can show you. What happened next would be debated by coalition scientists for decades. The hollow fragments began to die. Not all of them, not all at once, but those who wished to finally end their eternal hunger were allowed to let go. Sat with them as they faded, holding whatever appendage they offered, speaking whatever words seemed right. Other chaplains arrived, human and alien alike, and they did the same. Some of the hollow did not want to die. Some of them, for the first time wanted to try living again. These were given that chance. The coalition established a sanctuary world where the surviving fragments could exist peacefully, learning slowly what it meant to be part of the galaxy instead of trying to devour it. The war ended not with destruction, but with something stranger, something that had no equation for. Commander filed his final report 3 months after the Battle of the Nexus. He was dying himself now, his old body finally reaching its terminus. But he was not afraid. The human chaplain assigned to his ship sat beside his bed, holding his cold, scaled hand, speaking quietly of warm lights and peaceful endings. In his report, tried to explain what humanity had brought to the coalition. It was not their weapons, which were adequate but unremarkable. It was not their tactics, which they had mostly borrowed from older species. It was their irrational, mathematically indefensible belief that consciousness mattered, that every mind, no matter how alien or strange, was worthy of respect and comfort, that dying things deserved witnesses, that the equation was never just an equation. The language gained a new word after IV. Other species added their own versions. The translation matrix eventually settled on a standard rendering, though everyone agreed that something was lost in the conversion. The word meant, roughly, the warm light coming. No one could explain why species that did not believe in warm lights had started seeing them. Perhaps, wrote in his final sentence, it was because the humans had shown them how to look. He died peacefully, 3 days later, holding the chaplain's hand. His eyes, in the end, were watching something that no instrument could detect. But he was smiling when he saw it.